Thank you.
You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimberly, and welcome everybody to those who are listening to this live and those who will listen to it later. My hat's off to you. You know, the fact that you take some time to listen, to empower yourself, to make a real difference in your life. I mean, it's really very, very powerful, and you really can make a difference in how you feel and your health in so many different ways. So with that as an introduction, I want to just to have a few kind of take-home points. By the end of this next 45 minutes or an hour or so, there'll be some questions and answers at the end. I really want you to feel like that feeling anxious, you know, after cancer diagnosis is normal. It's expected. This is what we humans do. And you can take that energy, your life force energy, and harness that to empower yourself. So not only do I want to teach you how to kind of settle yourself down, be more calm, more cool, more collected, knowing that wise and compassionate brain, but you can actually use that energy in very, very positive ways. So that's, I hope you get some real concrete, practical ideas as to how to do that today. And lastly, I want to encourage you to actually look at the bigger picture, that when you look at your fears and actually able to transcend and embrace those natural, normal emotions, that will unleash more energy within your life. And you can find more purpose and meaning, and you'll have a better life because of it. So I really want to give you those tools and the perspective and attitude that can make a huge difference in your health. So that's the takeaway for the next 45 minutes, the practicality of what to do when. And this is how we're going to address this, from kind of paradoxical place of the power of acceptance, through talking about this human brain of yours and how it is designed to do this, give you these anxious feelings. We'll talk about setting the intention and then the practical things to do and not to do to facilitate or to create the conditions in which you feel more centered and grounded, both just generally and when those anxieties flare up again. I want to teach you a skill called reframing, and then ultimately looking at fear and having that kind of bigger spiritual and transcendent perspective. So it's a full house, and I do encourage you to put in your questions at times if you have any anything that's on your mind, and I will be asking you questions as well. So please join me in making this interactive and interesting and very, very pertinent to your life. Okay, so firstly, you are empowering yourself by actually listening to this presentation, by simply addressing the fact that we feel anxious at times and that we're willing to look at our anxiety. Actually, it's called exposure therapy, or I call it desensitization. So you don't make yourself feel worse, you can actually feel more relaxed and connected and calm and draw on your natural resilience that's always there. And as you live through those anxious moments, as you challenge yourself, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. And one of the principles I've been reading about through the YouTube videos and the presentations is, the worst case scenario is actually to avoid the anxious situation, like avoid going to your doctor's office visits, or avoid the phobias of the crowd and so on, because by kind of pushing those fears down and not exposing yourself, then you lose the capacity of transformation of that energy into life force. I want to start out with this idea that anxiety is normal, anxiety is expected, and no matter what you're feeling right now, it's totally fine as your starting point. And it's a paradox that if you're willing to accept whatever the emotional state is, whatever the thoughts are coming through, that's your starting point. That will allow you the transformation, allow you to make those breakthroughs so you can feel better and be healthier. So it's a paradox to be able to accept the truth of the reality of your situation in order to strengthen yourself. And I didn't understand really the power of acceptance really until I had an experience with a friend of mine in 2006. I'm going to read from our book. This is the Healing Circle. And just as the background, so I've also been very, very interested in what are the attributes of the remarkable cancer survivors, the people that do exceptionally well. And what I've noticed is that, through the literature, the scientific studies, when I first read it with Bernie Siegel in Love, Medicine, and Miracles in the 1980s, Alistair Cunningham and, Toronto Healing Journey, most recently Kelly Turner, PhD, talking about radical remissions and the attributes of people who have a spontaneous remission. It's all consistent. The people who are truly able to accept the reality of the situation actually are the ones who actually did better. And I read about it, I learned about it, and 30 years later, I think I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand it. But it took this story that I'm sharing you in our book to kind of figure this out. And the story starts with a dear friend of mine in medical school, Karen. We broke up after medical school. We didn't really get to connect with each other until kind of the late 90s when we were sharing Christmas emails with each other once a year about our families and so on. And then I got an email from Karen in 2006, and she basically said, Rob, can you give me a call? And I hadn't talked to her in, 15 years. And I thought to myself, oh, why is Karen wanting to talk with me? And as it turns out, I thought, geez, somebody in your family has a cancer diagnosis and they want to talk to the body, mind, spirit guy. And I got on the phone and her husband answered and he said, Karen has the cancer diagnosis. So she had found a lump in her armpits and then felt a lump in her breast and immediately knew she had a more aggressive breast cancer. And she was in the midst of, I think she had the breast off at that point. She had surgery. And I got on the phone with her and I was like almost in tears because this is my dear friend. And what I was so shocked was how grounded and clear and pragmatic she was. And I asked her about it. Karen, how is it that you're so collected, so centered? And she said, yeah, I was able to make that transition to acceptance, very, very quickly. And then people interpreted it as I was giving up. And so I finally had to share an email with, all my friends and family to explain my perspective. And so she actually, shared me this email as well, and I was able to publish it in our book. And so I'm going to read about it. And it's really around the power of acceptance and mortality, the elephant that's not. So she wrote to her friend, she said, but once I managed to accept that the reality of my mortality had always been there, I could accept that nothing fundamental in my life had really changed with this diagnosis. I'm still the same me. My life has not changed drastically or dramatically. I'm still here. I was not hit by a bus. My loved ones are still around me. Unbelievably, I can honestly say that I'm as happy now as I was 5 weeks ago. I am, in this moment, missing a body part or two, hair about to fall out, completely and utterly whole. And this allows me to see that the last few weeks and the year ahead, because she's going on to chemotherapy, as the first steps towards rather than a plunge from true wellness. And later in the email, she said, I suffered a couple days of despair after the diagnosis, which, as a commentary, most people are like freaked out of their tree for at least a month afterwards. But she made this transition in about 2 days. But since then, I've known that I will be okay. Maybe not okay in the way that I would have defined 5 weeks ago, but in a bigger sense. I felt that while I cannot be positive that I will beat this, I am positive that I will have the courage to face what is ahead. I am positive that I'll have the support from my loved ones, the expertise from my doctors, and ultimately the grace from God to ensure that this turn in the road will not be a negative force in my life. And I believed all that and still believe that from deep within my soul. But in the past 2 weeks, something else has crept in. And as an aside, here's the tension that I'm trying to talk about. I'm starting to believe, or want to believe, that I will beat this in the conventional sense. I'm starting to demand it of myself and to ask it of God. There is a proportion of women who survive breast cancer at my stage, so why not me? As another side, Karen's very well 13 years later, and she did it all. She did what I'm talking about, is the integrative approach, the best of the medical system, exercise, diet, all the empowerment piece there. But I'm telling you the story because acceptance is not resignation. Acceptance is not giving up, handing over your responsibility to God. Acceptance is that first step, but the tension is to also be proactive. It's to do both. It's that kind of sense of, letting life be as it is, but also getting what you need to get. It's like, doing to being to, that sense of the and both, not the either or is the idea. And so this is the paradox of being able to accept that we are going to feel anxious after a cancer diagnosis. There are going to be flares, there are going to be peaks that come up. And to be able to accept that and then still be able to work with it is the smarter approach, and allows those natural anxieties to dissipate or diminish or decrease with time. So both acceptance and proactivity is the takeaway from that story. The other really important starting point, so we accept that anxiety is normal, but the other important point is to be conscious, to decide how you want to choose to lead your life, because your brain will get better at whatever you practice. If you practice being anxious, stressed, upset, flustered, your brain will get very, very good at that. The triggers will tweak you into that very quickly and easily. Or if you practice being calm, centered, compassionate, then you can be better and better and better at doing that. And there's also this opportunity, which is the kind of more spiritual perspective, is like, how do you want to live your life? What's most valuable to you? How do you want to manifest your spirit? So that's the question around it. And when you can find that meaning, when you can find that direction, the small stuff falls off, to a greater or lesser degree. And as I was researching this talk, I heard a couple of metaphors around this idea of anxiety or fear of recurrence. One is, it's like a whale in the middle of your living room, and as time goes on, that whale can shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, but it doesn't go away completely. It can shrink to the size of a little book or a little bookshelf or something like that, and sometimes it will flare up again, but it doesn't go away completely. But do you want to pay attention to that, or do you want to pay attention to the other things in your life? The other metaphor was, a woman was talking about this idea that the anxiety was like in all the rooms in her house. So she came home and the anxiety was in every room in the house. And with time, the anxiety shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until it was in the kind of one of the back rooms, a smaller back room. So it's still there, it's still normal to have, but it didn't color the rest of her house. She's able to appreciate that living space, recognizing that was a small component there. So it's the same idea. So setting your intention is deciding consciously how you want to live your life. And to do that, we're going to do a little exercise together, but I also just want to offer you my meditation practice. So it's a ritual that I've been doing almost every morning, and I've been meditating for now 20 years. So we have a space in our house. I call the meditation room, very small space. I kneel on a mat. And the first part of it I would just call mindfulness. So I'm bringing my attention back to the breath, and inevitably within about 3 seconds of starting, my mind starts to chatter, and I bring my attention back. So the muscle of bringing my attention back. Like 2 seconds after that, I'm starting to think about something else, and on it goes. This is 20 years later. So the mindfulness is the first part, and we'll talk about meditation and why it's very powerful in terms of innervating your frontal lobe and putting you in a more wise, compassionate space. So that's the first probably 10 to 15 minutes. And then the next one is I put my hands kind of up. I'm showing you on camera just so you can see my hands, but I put my hands up, and it's more like prayer. It's like, that's the point where I'm saying, okay, I've practiced a skill that kind of makes me feel more centered in connection, but now I'm going to actually ask for direction. And you can say it in kind of a secular form, which is what I do, or you can use religious terms, whatever works for you. It's like, please help me, please guide me. Whatever is highest, whatever the greatest principles are, however you want to say that, let me be helpful, let me be a benefit to others, let me be loving and compassionate. So I'm talking about all the kind of attributes that I want to manifest. So that's the kind of invitation phase. Let me be an instrument of your love and peace. Like, I'm praying really hard each morning. Please help me. Please help me. And then the last phase is actually do like prostration, so which is putting my hands on the ground and putting my head down on the ground. I do that 3 times, sitting up, down 3 times. And that to me is a symbol of that I don't have control, really. I mean, I control maybe a little bit of what happens in my life, but I can't control other people's actions. I can't control, oftentimes the bigger picture, but I'm willing to submit and let go. So I create a visualization of how I want things to be, and then I let go. And I come back to kind of the sense of being mindful and being centered and remembering what's most important to me. So those are the phases. And I just put that all within a reflection of, you have a diverse life. How do you want to spend your precious energy? What sorts of things do you want to put your attentions into? And I'll talk to you about a mindfulness practice later on that is also the symbol of where do you want to put your attention. If you're so busy loving people and being kind, or whatever it is that is the most important thing to you, it's much harder to feel anxious, right? So you find that higher purpose, and the anxieties will naturally settle down. Okay, huge warm up, I know, to all that. So I want you to walk away with something that's practical. And the first way to look at this is that you have a human brain. This is the car, this is the horse that you ride. How do you ride this horse? How do you maintain your car so that it runs best? You have this brain, it has certain neurocircuitry over time. You have this psyche, you have, your history. How do you work with what's between your ears to make it function better? That's part of the takeaway. The other part of the takeaway is to recognize that we are human beings and we're anxious by nature. Through evolution, we are just, we're wired for a negativity bias. That's a good thing in lots of different ways. The issue is when it gets out of hand, right? When it's starting to dominate one's life, and you can't enjoy your activities, and you can't concentrate as well, and it's stopping you from doing the things you love to do, and it's affecting your relationships. That's when you want to kind of use a bigger perspective and say, okay, that's not helpful. But we can use our anxiety for good. Your anxiety will also help you do the exercise and the healthy habits. Your anxiety will make sure you get the best care from the medical system. So we want to use that. But essentially, we have this human brain, and we also have different triggers. You may notice, for instance, there are certain situations that can trigger you feeling anxious about cancer coming back. So, for instance, a lot of people say at the anniversary date of their diagnosis, often that they'll have a little kind of flare of anxiety. Coming up to a visit with your oncologist, or getting an extra test, those type of things. It's a normal pattern. They've actually studied this. Like a month before that, CAT scan or whatever it is. This is scanxiety that I'm talking about now. The anxiety starts to go up, and then a week before, and there's really a big spike, and then afterwards you get the good news from the CAT scan and starts to settle down. But it takes about a month to settle down in total, right? So that's the normal thing that people go through. That's the expectation. And one of the teachings here is to be able to watch your pattern. What are your triggers? You know, sometimes if you hear like a famous person who gets a cancer diagnosis, or a famous person whose cancer recurs, or somebody that you know dies of cancer, those can all be triggers to make you feel more anxious again, right? And it's natural and human. This is just what we do. We plan for the future, so we're always looking for what could we do different, you know, how could things go badly, and that's what we have to work with, is that human brain of yours. I do want you to use the anxieties. Okay, so we're going to feel anxious. This is normal. So what do we do with that anxiety beyond the healthy habits that I'm going to talk about? One is you get the best care from the medical system. So you get involved in your own care. You make sure you go to the follow-up appointments. You make sure that you know your care plan, what you should be doing. And the other thing you can do is actually talk to your physician to say, if my cancer comes back, what sorts of symptoms would I expect? So for instance, you get some little aches or here or there, but your physician saying, well, that's not how it would come back anyways. So then you don't have to worry about the aches and pains so much. So figuring out your situation and what could manifest. Is it a lump? Is it pain? Is it shortness of breath? Is it fatigue? Like, what do I need to look for? And then the other symptoms you can let go of. So again, you're using your anxiety, using your knowledge, using the frontal lobe of your brain to figure this out, to create a strategy for yourself. And lastly, I'm going to really talk about this idea that there are kind of two modes to your brain. So throughout the day, you flip between stressed and irritable and wise and compassionate. So your brain is in one of those two states of mind. So you flip back and forth between those two sides. And the idea is, through this webinar, I want you to teach you how you can spend more and more time in the wise and compassionate part of your brain. That's your better self, your happier self, the better wife, husband, daughter, son, friend. It's the you like to be and that people want you to be. So how do you do that? And so I use the hand model of the brain. The wrist is the spinal cord. First level, base of thumb is the reptilian brain, the fight or flight. And the other parts use this part to make you feel anxious. And then you have the limbic system, which is the emotional brain, and it's an approach system, but that's the stressed brain. And then ultimately you have your very, very human brain, which is the wise and compassionate part of the brain, which is the frontal lobe. And then throughout the day, you get stressed, you flip your lid, and you're living out of your stress brain, and then coming back home again to your better self. So how do you live out of the wise and compassionate brain is what I want to try to think about and work with you on today. So first of all, so you want to get the machinery of your frontal lobe to work better. And I think about it in two ways. One, what are the ways that you get your car to run better? How do you ride your horse better? Your horse, if they're well fed and they're well watered and all that stuff, they're going to run better. So what are the proactive things can you do? And then also, what are the things you can avoid? Which is, I'm starting to integrate that part in the talk to decrease your anxiety levels overall. So creating conditions for calm. So I want you guys to reflect, what can you do to make sure your frontal lobe is working better? So you got this brain tissue here. What does it need in order for it to really function well? And even though I'm not going to ask that question in a kind of chat, I am going to just have you think about that. So exercise is number one, right? I really think that we're designed, it's like the deer that gets the scare from the wolf or whatever, has this huge response. It's like, it's scared and it sprints out of there, it gets away from the wolf, and then in the field it will kind of like shudder and shake and kind of let that kind of all the kind of anxiety, stress, fear go through a physical action, right? If we have that same fear but we hold it in, then it's kind of trapped in the body. And that's why exercise, I think, is really important. The other one, I mean, I could talk about exercise for about 20 minutes, but what I want to say is that you can use your anxiety and focus it in a way that improves your chance of recovery and choose your chance of healing, right? So those anxieties, those fears get pushed into that first 2 to 3 minutes of exercise or physical activity when you're feeling a little bit, oh, this hurts a little bit, but then you focus, you have that clear vision of how you want to be, and you finish off your exercise routine, whatever it is. It is also a meta perspective. What you're tricking your human physiology to say, I'm still valuable to my tribe, right? So all that kind of anxiety gets transformed into exercise. The exercise sends the chemicals to the whole body that says, I need to live, I want to live. So metaphysically and physically, exercising really helps you out. 150 minutes per week, yes, 2 times per week using strength exercises. You grow some frontal lobe tissue on exercise. This I could talk about for a long time. I just say, number one, do something that's fun and lets out that anxiety, and you'll get stronger and feel happier. It releases the happy hormones. Number one. Okay, number one. Okay, diet. So what we're trying to do, remember, is stay in our wise and compassionate frontal lobe. Like, make this machinery work better, and then you can think more clearly in situations. You can talk yourself down more quickly. You feel better and happier when you stay living out of your frontal lobe. So therefore, how do you feed that brain tissue? And the first thing I've listed there is what they call low glycemic. So you don't want the spikes in sugar, because very high sugars and it's hard to concentrate. And then if you have that sugary stuff, sugary pop, white bread, all that stuff, the sugar gets into your bloodstream quickly, and then whoosh, you drop your blood sugars down, and you get a too low blood sugar, and your brain dissociates from its frontal lobe, goes into the stressed, irritable part of your brain, because this is the kind of food-seeking part of your brain. So low blood sugar, can't concentrate, can't process, you dissociate from your frontal lobe. Lastly, just think about this as brain tissue. Like, how do you feed the horse? How do you maintain the car? You feed it the materials that allow it to work better. And I'm thinking specifically omega-3 and some of the kind of fatty acids around that. Healthy fats, it's no longer a low-fat diet, it's actually a healthy fat diet, including in the background here is my avocado side of things. Essentially, a plant-based diet. Beans is another one that's key to kind of better brain health. When your brain is healthier, you're thinking more clearly, you're more resilient, the water's sliding off the duck's back, and you can process more easily and talk yourself down when those normal anxieties come up. Okay, those two things. Obviously, sleeping, setting up the conditions in which you're much more likely to sleep, I think is, you can't force yourself to sleep, but you can create those conditions, right? So the same routine, getting quieter, less light as you're getting closer to bedtime. Bedtime itself, stay in the dark, even 30 seconds of bright light, secretes melatonin, inhibits the release of melatonin and other healthy hormones of sleep. So stay in the dark. It's time of year right now where the light is getting very long. Use eye patches, blinds in the windows. I think napping less than 20 minutes, before 5 p.m. each day. Again, all these ways, when you're well rested, again, it's a 15-minute talk. The sleep kind of drains the toxins out of your brain. You wake up more clear thinking and happier. We'll talk about practicing a relaxation technique, and that it happens both, in the moment when you're feeling anxious, but just practicing that and getting neurocircuitry going that really helps you feel more relaxed and more at peace, because your brain gets better and better and better at doing that, and you can tap into that more easily. You're setting your stressometer from being kind of anxious, upset, flustered all the time to being much more settled. The same life circumstances, the same challenges on the day-to-day, but you're in a more settled state and you can make better decisions from that space. Okay, a couple more ones to add as the kind of brain hack here, biohack. One is oxytocin, this anti-inflammatory. For too many years, I've been talking from the position of the individual. I recognize now that we're so human in our evolution that the relationship part of this is important. So asking for a hug from your partner, your kids, and if you don't have a partner, etc., then petting a pet, or even kind of self-soothing, right? So you can like massage your legs at night and have a warm bath and just use the soap and really massage, really love yourself. So just even that, just a little bit. And you guys can do that at home. Nobody's watching right now. Just try that. Oh, I love myself as I am right now. Yeah, good. So releases oxytocin, anti-inflammatory, drives pro-social behavior. Lastly, this is about a balancing act, right? How do you want to live your life? What brings you to that better space? What brings you to your better self, right? So how do you nourish your soul? And that can be, through those relationships. Like really look at your life, like what are the things that are unnecessary? Let go and put your energy into the things that nourish you, including getting into nature. Sunlight especially is very helpful. Like that first kind of 30 minutes light in the morning, getting outside, just exposing yourself to sunlight is really helpful for the brain in the cycles, because anxiety is happening kind of in the background all the time. And what I'm trying to do is get you to set it at a lower level. We have the anxiety is brewing. It's like there's constantly this kind of feeling like, oh, something could go wrong. It's that feeling. And that's normal. But what I'm trying to push you towards is settling that down further and further. You do that by balancing your life and doing the things that you love, hobbies, friends, all that stuff. Nourish your soul, take care of yourself, love yourself. Another attribute of the remarkable cancer survivors, self-love, self-care. That's the foundation to actually being a better person and being able to help other people. Okay, so that's creating conditions for calm. You're setting yourself down, you're less likely to get primed and much more easily to recover if you do feel very anxious. Then there's the other side of it. What do you avoid? And then I just recognized what's happened in my own life. I'm so sensitive that I can't watch television news. I see these images and it upsets me. And if I disagree with someone's perspective, world leader's perspective, I can also feel anxious. And the news is presenting the way that's kind of all about the negative side of things. So I listen to CBC radio like once every 3 or 4 days so that I can hear what's happening in the world. I can stay connected. But avoid the things that make you anxious, like horror films or the other things that are just like super upsetting with not much value. Relationship issue. What are the relationships you want to nurture, and what are the relationships that you need to kind of cut back on? And yes, we all have kind of duties within our lives, but setting a boundary. The sword of loving kindness cuts the knots of the unnecessary stuff. And it's a very, very powerful symbol. It's saying, no, I'm not going to put my energy there. It's not worth it. I care for myself. And when you open up that space, the beauty and the gratefulness and all that other stuff is much greater chance of kind of percolating through your psyche and in your consciousness. And say as well, think about the social media. Every time you look at an email, you get a little shot of cortisol. Right? So be especially leery of that first thing in the morning, right? Because what you're trying to do is settle yourself down, get into the kind of more relaxed, clear thinking state, and have that state follow you throughout the day. And then I think about, it's like everyone's life, Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. You're seeing all these like wonderful moments, and there's a natural, and actually the science I think is there, natural inclination is to judge yourself, say, I don't have a very exciting life compared with what I'm seeing on social media. Social media is great if it allows you to connect with people, but it kind of, scanning through too much stuff is hard on that human psyche. And then you want to avoid the things that can make it worse, right? You know, smoking creates that kind of loop of guilt and frustration, and alcohol, you know, you definitely lose the frontal lobe function on the alcohol side, too much alcohol. Okay, so again, it's just that loving perspective. And the last one I had mentioned earlier is do the things that scare you, that are necessary. Like, so you have to go to your physician's appointment. You know, you do that, and you continue to put yourself through that exposure, so you get stronger and stronger and stronger with time. Okay, so even if you do all those things really well and you try to live, you know, a meaningful life, et cetera, you're still going to have times where, oh, my cancer could come back, right? And so you're in that kind of state, that scared, frustrated state, and your brain's like, oh, I'm scared right now. Normal, expected, and not to judge oneself, right? This happens to everybody. Interestingly, if you have a plan beforehand, okay, I know that when I'm coming up to my mammogram, I'm going to get really scared that first, you know, the day or two afterwards when I'm waiting for my doctor's phone call for the good news or whatever. So if you know that that's going to cause you a lot of fluster, then have a plan to know, okay, well, I know that breathing technique really helps, or if I soothe myself, or if I really think about, you know, what I would do if. So whatever strategy works for you, but it's better to have the strategy ready, because when you're in the I'm feeling anxious, it's hard to remember what works. Okay. Next, this is like a living experiment to try to understand yourself. And one of the first steps is it's because it's a core belief or a thought that's driving the anxiety. If you can just be really mindful, like really present to, oh, what's this like? Like, be very curious. What does it feel like to be anxious right now? What are the sensations within my body? What I've been thinking about? And you'll be able to start to identify patterns, and the patterns will be helpful in a couple of ways. One is, you'll kind of know going into a situation, oh, here comes my anxiety. And secondly, the earlier that you pick it up, the easier it is to settle down. You'll be able to kind of sort through the cause, settle yourself down earlier. And it's very helpful. So then, what I've been teaching, the kind of cognitive therapy, looking at how your thoughts and core beliefs cause the anxiety, but that's not going to be effective if that technique by itself is not going to be effective if you're like so scared, so flustered that you can't even think. So at that point, you need to kind of settle yourself down. You need to kind of talk yourself down, right? And that takes what I would call body up, meaning you use a technique in your body, and your body sends a signal up to your brain that basically says, I'm safe. I think that's the takeaway, is body up. It's a mind-body connection, but you use the body in order to settle yourself down, and then you can use your compassionate, wise brain to talk yourself through it. So a couple of techniques that I'm going to take you through shortly. The breathing technique, the long, slow, smooth out breaths. In fact, you can do that with me just right now. Slow in, but then long, slow, smooth out. Right? So immediately, it's the longer, slower, smoother out breath that actually creates a relaxation response. It goes through the diaphragm to your vagus nerve up to your brain. It says, I'm safe. So that's one way to go at it. The second one is actually very interesting as well. It's pretend that you're not stressed. So the idea is, even right now, as you're listening, you can slump in your chair. As you're slumping here, imagine that you're chewing, like you're in the middle of eating or chewing gum. In fact, if you had gum and when you're feeling anxious, you can have a piece of gum, but you're slumping. Now, if you were stressed and upset and having a huge, stress reaction, would you be in that position? No. And your body is getting the signals of like, oh, I'm slumping, I'm chewing gum. I can't be stressed right now. And that will also send the signal up to your brain to say, I'm safe, I'm okay, I can handle this, right? So that's a couple of kind of physical techniques. And I'm going to break down this breathing technique in a moment here. Now, interestingly, there's also this technique of remembering what it's like when you feel good again. So for instance, if someone has a real anxiety of giving a presentation, and you have them remember, remember the point in the presentation when you really settle down. They say, yeah. And what was happening? And, well, I was starting to notice people, and people were starting to ask questions. So that happens about 15 minutes in. And so the idea is to remember the time when you're feeling relaxed, or when that first transition happens between feeling anxious and, I'm like, okay, I remember my family, right? So then you kind of, it's like a form of visualization to say, that's what feels good. I'm back to myself again. I'm back to being centered. So it's a memory. And again, these are the techniques you're using to settle yourself down, so that then you can use your mind to talk yourself through it. And then I put this one in this section, but when you get those flares, it's important to kind of share at some point. Maybe not in the midst of that, when you're feeling most anxious, but maybe at the end of the day, talk to your partner or a friend. I remember this morning I was thinking about my mammogram and I'm starting to feel really anxious. So just having that wise ear in your life who's going to listen without trying to correct or offer advice is extremely powerful. And what I would say is to practice that. Find that wise, your partner or your friend or whatever, and just tell them before, look, I had a tough day. I don't want you to correct me. I just want you to listen to me, right? So you're telling them, you're determining how the culture is within this relationship of just listening and just caring. Right? You can reach out to somebody and help them as well, or accept help also settles down our anxiety levels. But really talking to someone, I think, is a very, very powerful way. It's like, if you can express your anxieties, like through like journaling or talking it out, you dissipate their power over you. Really, this is the desensitization process. And to recognize, this is the human experience. No longer my anxiety, my pain, my frustration, but this is what happens. This is what happens to us. Okay, so I wanted to take you through this technique. So visualize what it feels like. The last time you were feeling anxious, like, fear, my cancer could come back, my cancer could progress, something like that. And visualizing yourself in that situation, I want you to press the pause button. So you're freezing the movie visualization within your mind. Now, what's happening? Oftentimes, almost always, it's the catastrophizing thoughts about what might happen that continues to drive the stress reaction. And so we want to settle those down. So the first thing you do to get up into your frontal lobe is to become very curious, and I want you to do this with me right now. Become very curious of the physical sensations in your body. Like, what does that feel within your chest, within your legs, within your throat, within your head? So the physicality. You come back, you're bringing your consciousness into your body and out of your kind of mind. Very curious. Continue to use the curiosity. 4 slow, deep breaths, especially slow on the out breath. And as you're doing that, you're using the kind of relaxation phase, deeper, slower out breath. Recognizing that you're actually relaxing your body right now as you're doing this. 3, nice and slow and smooth. No chest breathing, it's all happening in the lower abdomen. Bring your consciousness deep into your body, into your sacrum pelvis, right? And then from there, you send that up, you back into your frontal lobe, and then you talk to yourself. Look, this is a tough situation. I understand how you can be upset, but let's just take this one step at a time. I can handle this. I've been through difficult situations before. I have lots of strength and resilience here, right? So then your wise mind is actually talking you down. You're looking at the core beliefs that are causing this and so on. So the resilience is there. We just get distracted. This kind of fog of anxiety that comes over us, when we have all that kind of natural intelligence there. Okay, the next step is actually look at the source of the thoughts that are causing this. And this is called cognitive behavioral therapy, or reframing is what we're using. And we use it with mindfulness as well, which is using your wise and compassionate brain to help reframe it. And I'll just take you through the ideas. The idea is that the thought causes the emotion, right? So thought, you know, things are going to go badly, my cancer's going to come back, is causing the kind of feeling of fear and anxiety, right? So if we can let go of the thought, I don't know what's going to happen, I have a good life right now, you know, those type of things, then this part of the reaction settles down. So that ultimately in the last line there, this means you can feel better, change in emotions, outlook, productivity. Your best self can come through when you work out of your wise and compassionate brain. We use it as a 3-column technique based on David Byrne's work. So situation is just the truth of what's happening there. And then if we can be mindful that we oftentimes think in exaggerated or distressing ways, and that they're not, sometimes they're distorted for certain, and that distortion causes the extra suffering. Sure, we're going to feel some anxiety. It's normal to feel anxiety, but if it's all the extra inflated, unnecessary stress and suffering that we're trying to let go of through this technique. Then in the second column, we use our awareness of the inquiry, and then ultimately, the wise and compassionate brain is kind and acknowledges the difficulty, has a bigger perspective, and is also encouraging. And just some examples that can make it easy. So let's say you're just in the midst of your life and then thinking, oh, I've got that, you know, cancer center appointment. Like, so a little bit of anxiety is starting to rise at that point. So that's just like, you're just in the day-to-day, you're planning your life, boom, you have that thought, you're thinking about it. And then on top of that, you're creating some extra commentary. And I've used a huge exaggeration here, but it's actually not far off the truth for many of us, especially when we're, you know, a bit more agitated or not feeling well. Saying, I can't handle this. This is too much. This is never going to work out. My life is totally out of control. Right? It's like the catastrophizing mind. Like, I can't handle this. Is too much. You know, that type of feeling. And if you can watch yourself think, you know, oh, that's how I'm thinking right now. You don't have to buy into this. You don't have to believe every thought. You can work through the second column. What emotions follow this way of thinking? It's like, I feel scared and anxious. How does my body feel? I get a stress reaction. All the stress reaction, is it helpful or harmful? I'd argue it's harmful. You're not really empowering yourself by thinking this. How is it exaggerated or irrational? I can't handle this. Well, actually, you are handling this, is the truth. This is too much. Well, it is a lot, but it isn't too much for you. You have lots of resilience. This is never going to work out. Well, actually, you don't know. It's possible that things could work out really well for you. My life is totally out of control. Well, we have some lack of control, but it's not totally out of control, right? So you're able to kind of use your logical mind and say, well, that thinking is a little bit much. And then lastly, if you can catch yourself there, then you can talk to yourself, especially with a wise and compassionate mind. Ah, yeah, I know, this is a really tough time to think about that. But there's no use in getting all worked up. I can take this one step at a time, and I can find the good in each moment, right? So there's the can. I can take this one step at a time. I can draw on my own resilience. I can learn from this. There's lots of ways that you can. I can manifest my spirit in the midst of the greatest difficulties, right? There's all this empowerment piece that is part of this technique, and it all comes from the heart level. Okay, let's say you hear in the news that someone has had a relapse of their cancer, right? Most people have had a cancer diagnosis, a little bit of stress, anxiety, and then on top of that, they can add a thought that causes more distress. So I'm not saying you're gonna feel perfectly well. I'm just saying if you exaggerate, if you let your thoughts get away on you, and you don't reframe the core beliefs that are causing these thoughts, then you get out of whack. If that person's cancer came back, it's going to happen to me too, could be the thought, right? The kind of, and sometimes that's at a more kind of almost like primitive level where you can't access the actual thought, but that's the core belief that's driving this. So if you could feel that, hear that, oh, this is going to be bad news for me, therefore, you think, oh, geez, that's quite the core belief. You can go through that. Causes more fear. Body has a stress reaction. I'm going to suggest this is harmful. How's it exaggerated? How's it exaggerated? Because it's what they call the fortune teller error. You don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. And to make this prediction of all the negativity is not helping you. So then how do you talk to yourself, which is the third column here? Say, it is scary, but I don't know what will happen in the future. Right? This is scary, but the fact is we don't know what's going to happen. Worrying is not going to help, which is just true. I can choose to live my life in the best way possible now. Right? So then you focus on what you can control. Well, I can focus on being kind to the next person that walks in the door, the next person I meet, however that is. Right? So I can put my energy into things that are meaningful to me. Okay, I'll just go through this one quickly. Sometimes you start with the core belief, like they say you're supposed to stay paused, but I feel awful, angry, helpless, filled with despair. I'm afraid of making it worse. Now, firstly, the feeling is not a distorted thought. Feelings are just feelings. What we're after is the thoughts. I'm afraid I'm making it worse. It's actually not true. Stress doesn't actually cause recurrence of cancer on average. Yes, you want to do the healthy stuff, but that's actually not really true. How is it exaggerated or irrational? Frankly, you can't stay positive all the time. That's it. It's just not natural to kind of put on a brave face all the time, and you're just kind of suppressing the normal, natural things that are coming up. I guess the idea is if you have to stay positive all the time. If you go to become negative, you're not going to get stuck there. It's going to come back again. Okay, so the reframe. It's natural to have strong and negative feelings. I'm learning to comfort myself and ask for reassurance from others. Right? So then it becomes practical. And I can work with my state of mind, and that helps. Right? There again, it's the empowerment piece. You can take control of your life by focusing on what you can control. I like the saying, change the game so you can win, which essentially it's not about winning against other people. It's like change how you have little successes in your life by changing what defines success for you, right? So success for me is I see somebody and I'm kind to them. I've had a successful interchange. So I've changed the game so I can win. Okay, I want to, and lastly, this is the teaching around the weekend retreats. So we run these weekend retreats on the Sunday morning. We've had people from Friday evening right through Saturday. Sunday morning, we actually talk about fear very, very directly. And the power of that exercise, and because we have people in small groups and they really go into it, they talk about all aspects of their fear, is when you look at your fears, you dissipate the strength of the fear. You really, it shrinks incredibly. And I'll just give you the example. So I'd ask somebody, I could ask somebody, I don't ask them in the retreat, like, why are you scared of your cancer coming back? And they could answer, I'm scared of dying. So, and then I'd say, okay, well, what scares you about dying? Well, it doesn't scare me, but I don't want my life to be shortened. So what's so bad about the shortening of your life? Well, then I would miss, all my family members and friends, right? So you can take, I miss out on their stories. You can take those different pieces and say, then reflect, well, then therefore I should really connect with my family members and friends now, right? Or, I'm worried about, how my family members will cope if I die. Well, then have by looking at that fear directly, you actually can do something about it. You can actually have that conversation. You have the empowerment piece, and people have incredible resilience. And when you have that conversation, by looking at it directly, it helps you a lot. I just want to mention the transcendent perspective, and I would call it spirituality. And there's one experiment that I read about recently that was really very telling. So they gave, I think it was 51 people who have a cancer diagnosis who were near the ends of their lives, and many of them, almost all of them, were having the normal natural anxiety about dying. And they actually gave them a psychedelic drug called psilocybin, and most everybody, 80+% of people, would have had a kind of mystical experience taking that drug. It's very rare to actually have a negative experience. I guess it's possible, but almost everybody has a very, very positive experience. And coming back from that, it was a very, very high percentage, about 80 to 85% of people no longer fear dying. And it invigorates me and inspires me that if we can do our spiritual work and really come to terms with death and the afterlife and so on, we can really decrease our anxieties now. And, you know, the other way to look at that one is the kind of near-death experiences. You know, people who come back from near-death experiences have been transformed. They no longer fear dying. They recognize for them that there's an afterlife and that there's greater purpose to their lives and so on. And so if we can be able to begin to tap into that perspective of that there's a wholeness or a beingness that holds our life, and that it's natural, normal to have the fears and anxieties. It's part of the human journey, and then we can become, you know, much more comfortable, you know, in the midst of those. So the paradox is going into it allows you to kind of transcend the fear. All right, I've seen that I've gone an hour, and I'll stop here and just first of all acknowledge the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network, and maybe we'll leave up that slide while we accept questions from the audience. And I've also put in our website, healingandcancer.org, where you can order our book or like, I know, 150 free videos there, documentaries, etc. And many of the skills, and we'll include this talk on our website there as well. But I'm really very honored to be able to present to folks. And thanks, Kimberly, for having me. And thanks, everybody, for attending. Really, really, really appreciate your work. And I'm just going to open it up to questions. Very, very, very happy to chat with whoever wants to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Do you want me to take over, or do you want to read the question? Okay, so someone was just asking what the title of the book was again.
It's The Healing Circle. You can order it on our website, healingandcancer.org. Half of the book, like every second chapter, is the teachings from a weekend retreat, and a quarter of the book is actually on reframing, so the skill that I was trying to teach through the 3-column technique. And then half of the chapters are the remarkable true stories of people who've attended the retreats, and it's been really very, very well endorsed by lots and lots of people. So thanks for the free plug, whoever asked that question. Really appreciate it.
Okay, and then how does acceptance help those dealing with advanced cancer? Do you have resources for people who won't survive this?
Yeah, I would say go to the website, but really the principles are the same principles, right? So even a person who has advanced cancer in which we don't expect them to be cured of their cancer and they're going to die at an earlier phase than they would have otherwise, it's the same principles of, you know, how do you live your life now? And when you do feel those anxieties and fears, how do you work with those fears? So how do you live your best life even in the kind of incurable phase? And the other one, which I really appreciate the question, because I forgot to say that I highly endorse, you know, working with a counselor or a social worker, psychologist. You know, there are some powerful techniques here that I've just kind of touched on in terms of cognitive therapy and reframing and teaching these relaxation techniques. And so if you're really struggling with this and your quality of life has been detracted by kind of fears of recurrence and so on, then tap into those resources within the cancer centers, or, you know, family physician will probably set you up with somebody. But, you know, talking to professionals is a very powerful way to help with those symptoms.
Perfect. And then there's one that's cancer has come back 5 times. Is there something more they could do or that you recommend them doing?
Right, yeah. So this is the, this question of how do you maximize your chance of recovery, your longevity, and your quality of life. And, with 5 recurrences, it's unlikely that the medical system is going to, create that home run. But I still endorse trying to get the best care from the medical system, because there are billions of dollars that are being invested. They're getting more and more targeted therapies. You never know when that next trial is going to come up with some medication that changes the cancer into a chronic condition in your situation. So I still endorse medical care, and then body, mind, and spirit, how to tap in and get yourself the best perspective there. And find the meaning. So body, mind, and spirit is how can you express your spirit in the midst of it? How can you get into the physiology of love and connection so much that it has an influence on the physical side? And then, it's hard to say, but in some sense, let go. The remarkable cancer survivors no longer were scared of dying. They were more concerned about how they manifest their spirit of life. And so when you go into that space of how can I, be my best self and connect most, I think that can really help. But again, the website's there, Body, Mind, and Spirit, in terms of, maximizing recovery chances.
Okay, and I have a question from a pediatric oncology. Do you find patients receptive to this method? Have you worked on it with children before?
Yeah, so I do work within the pediatric world. I'm on the radiation side, and so I only treat about 25 cases per year, and I don't get quite the same kind of contact as the pediatric oncologists that give chemotherapy. And the kids are, the kids are so individual, and they're going through different developmental stages. And so the idea is you can still look for the healthy activities and the healthy diets, and you teach kids mindfulness and relaxation, exercise, et cetera. But kind of psychological and spiritual side, they're probably going to lead us on that one. So I wouldn't, it's really chatting with the team, chatting with the social worker, figuring out if there are other kind of complementary ways of finding empowerment that works for that child and works for that family. So I wish I'd offer a better answer on that side.
Okay, and then this one says, I'm a dietitian and work with cancer patients. Are there any courses you would recommend to take that I can be more effective with my one-on-one consultations, since it goes beyond only nutrition consultation?
Yeah, as healthcare, you would know this. I'm talking to the dietitian nutritionist right now. You would know it, that bringing your spirit into that connection is very healing, right? So beyond, you and I both have technical skills. I have a certain kind of technical skill around applying radiotherapy and maximizing chance of cure and palliation and all that stuff. But really, it's my presence. It's my ability to connect and listen and totally love that person in front of me who I'm serving. That's where the healing happens. From a technical side, I'm not a dietitian, and then there's just such good science coming out now around brain function and so on. So you might be able to follow up and figure out those courses, but you would have greater connection and access to that. But just to recognize that it's your presence and your compassion that has a tremendous effect on healing within that relationship. And that's why I think it actually isn't, there's all sorts of different types of psychotherapy, and none of them is most effective. It's because it's the quality of the presence of the practitioner that really matters most.
Okay, and then we'll end off here with this last question about where and when are the retreats held?
It's too bad, because we just had this amazing retreat in Halifax in late April. It was a spirituality and cancer retreat. That was our 60th retreat. So next one is in Bangor, Maine in mid-June. And then I'm trying to set something up for Montreal. But if you want to contact me, and Kim has the contact information, you know, if you're willing to kind of work with us and kind of offer a weekend retreat in your city, I would love to do it. I haven't been back to Ottawa for a retreat in a while. Anyways, all to say that please reach out to healingandcancer.org. Let's figure out how to make it happen. And I just absolutely love the retreats and those materials. So, and blessings to everybody who listened to this this talk today. Really, really, really appreciate your great hearts.